Hi, I'm Scott Haas. Thanks for joining me on Chef's Table. Today I am joined by Chef Dave Pasternack of Esca. Esca, in the heart of Broadway, is an amazing exception to the vast array of tourist dives and old-school haunts in that part of Manhattan. It's one of the best fish and shellfish restaurants in the United States, and that's all due to the genius of Chef Dave Pasternack. Dave is humble, a working stiff, gruff in speech and demeanor. He talks like a guy who's been fishing all day. So how does Dave do it? Is it his access to great product? A gentle touch despite his gruff manner? A talent at scouting the best the sea has to offer? Now, Dave Pasternack sits down with me on Chef's Table. Dave, thanks for taking the time to meet with me today. Moments before we started this interview, you were nice enough to bring up these pieces of this gorgeous big-eye tuna. That was stunning, and it was, what, 130 pounds? You broke down in the kitchen. What did you do to it?
I just put salt on it. I didn't even put olive oil on it.
Just salt?
I kept it extra simple.
So that's...
I could still taste that flavor in my mouth.
Yeah, I was going to say, the only problem with it was that from this point moving forward, I'm going to say the other tuna I eat in life is not going to be as good as what I just had.
Try.
You try. So listen, you know, I'm telling you the truth, Esca's my favorite fish and seafood restaurant in the country. So why is that? I mean, what are you doing here that's unique? It's fish, it's shellfish. A lot of people cook fish and shellfish.
I mean, I just think, you know, we do our own little twist to it. You know, we take the product and maybe we just add a little something to it that makes it a little bit different. And then we get the product. I mean, you just tasted that tuna. You know, that's as good as tuna you're going to get.
Right.
I mean, the reality of it is that fish should have gone to Japan.
So how did you get it?
I buy a lot of fish from the one fisherman, so he kind of felt obligated.
That's interesting, because I wonder if, because the guys who are selling the fish and the shellfish, they know that you can do something with it. They respect what you do with it. Are you getting better product than some of the chefs?
I think we get a lot better product than most of the chefs. I mean, first of all, we try and specialize in local seafood. You know, I mean, there is times that we have to buy stuff from, you know, Alaska or whatever, you know, different times of year, the Gulf. But, you know, day in, day out, really our specialty is local seafood. And if you went around New York and you asked 100 chefs, probably half of them would know half the fish and half of them wouldn't know half the fish.
You mean the fish that's even here in the waters?
Here in the waters.
Wow. So you acquired this knowledge like over the years, like?
Well, I mean, fishing's my passion, you know.
Okay.
I mean,
always?
Work just pays for fishing.
So you're being paid for your passion. That's sweet. That's great.
Exactly.
And the restaurant now is what? Is it 12 years old?
We will be 13 years in the beginning of the year.
At the beginning, January 1st, 2013?
In March.
March.
2013.
So I've been coming here for, I don't know, 7 or 8 years, and I've seen a few changes, but I'm not really articulate about the changes. What kind of changes have you made over the 13 years that you've been here? Or maybe you haven't.
Well, I mean, no, we've made quite a few changes. I mean, you know, I think as time goes, you realize what your customers want and, you know, what they demand. You know, we've made changes to the decor of the restaurant. I think the food is, you know, progressed and adapted. I've reached out, you know, all over the world to find, you know, new interesting products, because there's many products that come from the sea. My new fascination now is seaweeds.
Seaweeds.
I think it's really a big future. Seaweeds, sea vegetables, and sea herbs.
When you say seaweeds, you're talking about dried stuff or
no,
fresh?
All fresh.
All fresh.
All fresh. There's a large culture in different countries. It's not here yet, but I think people are starting to realize that its potential. I mean, it's pure protein, it's very healthy for you, it's got a lot of flavor, it's quite diverse, there's many, many, many varieties.
It's interesting what you're saying, because this July I was in Japan and I met a kelp sommelier.
Yeah.
They dry the seaweed and they sell it to create various broths. And it's very popular, and it's very expensive too.
It is quite expensive. The stuff I've been buying from Galicia in Spain. And it's all harvested by hand, it's all wild product, and they have, you know, many varieties of vegetables that come from the sea, things that you wouldn't even remotely imagine.
Well, that's another thing that you just mentioned too. You say it's wild, and it's intriguing because fish and seafood, are the few products that restaurants can sell that are wild. I mean, a restaurant can't sell wild venison, they can't sell wild duck, so you're blessed because you can in fact sell wild things that are not farmed.
I mean, you're selling less and less of it, but you know, it still exists. You know, the sea is our last frontier. You know, there's been a resurgence of, you know, management of it, which is obviously in the positive. And, you know, and hopefully to sustain the product over the future.
Tell me a little bit about your suppliers. I know you buy product from Brown Trading in Portland, Maine. Is there anyone else I should know about, or is it just guys from various venues?
I mean, there's many guys from various venues. It's like your suppliers, you have to inspire kind of like your cooks. You have to force them to go out and find things for you and so on and so on. So, you know, really those are the best suppliers. You know, a couple of weeks ago, the guy who I don't really do a lot of business, he got some barrel fish, which is an excellent sushi fish that come from the south. It has almost a real sweet, like firm meat to it. And he called me up and he said, listen, you know, I have 1 box of barrel fish. And I said, I'll take them. You know, I said, I'll split it half and half. I sent half over to Italy and I kept half for here for Esca.
So guys are showing up to the restaurant, in a sense, you know, with trucks and saying, listen, I want you to take a look at this?
Yeah, guys do show up with the trucks. You know, you have to be careful with that, you know. I mean, you have to make sure they have the, you know, correct paperwork.
Right, I understand. But I mean, like that, people know that if it's a beautiful product, you'll buy it.
Absolutely. You know, like the tuna you just tasted came from, you know, it came from local fishermen, you know. He called me yesterday. He said, you know, the guy's on his way in. He said, you know, he had one big eye that was 130 pounds. I said, all right, I'll take it. And he said, you know, I got some long fins and yellow fins. I said, you know, you want me to buy the whole, they'll have to buy everything? He said, I would like you to buy everything. So I bought everything. I resold some fish to a friend of mine.
So you bought this not having tasted it, knowing the guy selling it to you was okay?
Yeah, he's a excellent fisher.
So you've been lucky.
And, you know, I know that when he catches the fish, he bleeds them correctly. He puts them into a slush tank, which is a combination of seawater and a lot of ice. So you cool the core temperature of the fish rapidly.
What I mean, though, is that what I'm saying, I guess, is that over the years you've developed these relationships with these purveyors.
Yeah.
You know, they trust you and you trust them. That's not easy.
No, and I pay them quickly, which is a big aspect, you know, because like the cost of fuel on your boat. You know, a guy goes out to the canyon to go fishing. You know, he's putting in 1,500 gallons of gasoline, 2,000 gallons of gasoline. It's crazy.
I wonder if you can say a little bit about the seasonality of what you're doing. I mean, you have obviously you have the 4 seasons: winter, spring, summer, fall. I mean, what shows up on menus and what doesn't? I mean, I know about shad, but what's less obvious? I mean,
fish is very seasonal. You know, we'll start with the spring. In the spring, obviously, you have shad, cod. The best run of cod typically is like, you know, January, February, March, late winter into the early spring. You know, the last couple of years we've had excellent fishery in Montauk, which is great. I mean, that means that some conservation is working. You know, scallops, also that time of year. Some fish, as you get into later spring, like April, May, and June, you don't want to eat because they start to spawn. So what happens is when fish spawn, the muscle gets tough because they're putting all their energy into producing babies. So like flounders, fluke, cod spring, hake, you know, in the late spring. But also some of the benefits of the late spring is you get like the roe. I mean, there is some byproducts of the fish that's good when they are spawning.
So I wanted to ask you about seasonality and customers. When I've been here, I see a lot of the same faces. You've got a regular clientele. How do you help people realize, well, you know, we've got this seasonal thing going here, the cod that you love, maybe it's September, maybe you shouldn't be having the cod. How do you educate your customers about that?
I mean, it's taken time, but I think that, you know, people kind of, the majority of people who live in New York understand that. That, you know, the availability of the product isn't all the time, but you do get that all the time. You know, last time I was here, I had this, you know, great piece of, you know, wild salmon. Sorry, it's out of season.
So what do you, person wants the wild salmon, what do you offer them instead, just as an example?
I'll recommend, depending what's on the menu. Right. You know, maybe, have you ever tried black sea bass? You know, we have these great black sea bass. They're fishing them right out in Montauk right now. That's what you should eat. But, you know, back to that subject, it's always interesting. So a customer comes in and says, what should I eat? Right? I say, okay, you know, have a little bit of crudo, try this spaghetti that we made with the seaweed, and then have a piece of black bass. You think they would be smart enough that's what they would order, right?
Right, of course.
Most of the time, no.
Why not?
I don't know. I haven't really figured that out yet.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about the Italian influence on your cooking. I think of Italian food as the height of simplicity, you know, brilliant ingredients, and again, seasonality. So what makes the food, what makes this food here Southern Italian or Italian?
Well, I mean, I think exactly what you said, you know. I mean, you're dealing with raw product that's exquisite, and then you're basically cooking it or serving it raw with as minimal as possible. I mean, obviously you have to adapt to the New York market where, you know, it needs a little flair to it.
But that takes a lot of guts because you're not using a lot of sauces that
I don't use any sauces.
Right.
You know, I use no sauces, you know. I mean, I want the people to eat the fish the way it is, you know. Put a little lemon on it, a little olive oil. That's it, some salt.
Yeah, that takes a lot of guts because, you know, it requires that you use first-rate product because you can't hide.
You have to use first-rate product, and you have to cook it correctly because there's nothing to mask it.
Right.
You know, if you overcook it and it's a little overcooked, the customer's going to know. There's not something for them to dip it into,
right,
to wet it.
Right. There's no ketchup.
There's no ketchup, exactly.
In the time that you've been here, the 13 years, has the supply of products changed? I mean, 13 years ago you were getting blank.
Absolutely.
So what's changed? What are you getting now that you didn't get 13 years ago?
I mean, you see some new things that we didn't get before, and some things we just don't see anymore.
Okay.
You know, like this past week I had pompano. Probably haven't had pompano in 6 months. You know, and we used to see it all the time. But you know, fish, what people don't understand, fish cycle. They say there's a 6-year or an 8-year cycle. So like this year, there's no sea trout. Maybe next year there'll be a ton of them. And maybe you won't see them again for 6 years. You know, bluefish are the same way. You know, they kind of come and go in cycles.
I mean, it's interesting too because there's been all these food scandals of some restaurants selling, say, grouper.
Well, red snapper's a big scandal, and grouper's a big scandal. I'll tell you a great story. So I'm in South Florida fishing with a buddy of mine in Key Largo. Him and his dad are commercial fishermen, and we're grouper fishing. But grouper in Florida is closed from December to March, spawning season. So we're catching beautiful big grouper, but we're throwing them all back. And every menu in South Florida has grouper on the menu.
Right. So what is the grouper that they're
It's
serving?
obviously not grouper that's coming from Florida.
Right.
So they're either, you know, they're buying it from Mexico or this or that, or they're buying frozen fillets.
Maybe it's not even grouper.
Maybe it's not even grouper. Maybe
Yeah.
it's tilapia.
Right, maybe it's tilapia is what I'm thinking. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that, I mean, it's sad to say, but one of the things that differentiates your restaurant from a number of other fishing restaurants is that if it says grouper, it's grouper.
Yeah. Snapper's a big scam, too. You know, they did that thing on like one of the news channels.
Yeah.
And they went to like, you know, 20 restaurants that had snapper on the menu, and like 2 of them.
Right, exactly.
Wild salmon too. I did a thing
Right.
with a couple years back with Eric Repair, and they went around to all the top fish markets in New York City, and they bought wild salmon. And there was 20 of them.
Yep.
I gave them one, right? And we did blind tasted them. We cooked them all the same. We just lightly sauteed them with a little bit of olive oil, salt, pepper. We did it at La Bernardin.
Yep.
And 2 of them were wild. 5 of them were what we call slacked wild, which means that it's been frozen.
Okay.
And then they thawed it out, and the rest weren't wild.
And the reason why they label it as wild is they can get more money for it.
Yeah, it demands a much higher price.
Shameless, but it is bad. It is bad. But again, it is what differentiates what you do here from other restaurants because there's an integrity about your product that customers can depend upon. So the sense I'm getting, and I've had for some time, is there's this kind of elegance or simplicity in the best sense about what you do. How about your crew, your cooks? Can they appreciate the intelligence of the simplicity of what you're doing, or you get into arguments with these guys like, hey chef, how about a sauce, or how about this, or how about that? I mean, I realize you're in charge. I'm just curious.
There is no argument.
No, I understand that. I'm just no, but are there conversations? Are there discussions where you explain to the guys?
I think that when you find the right people to work for you, they realize the benefits of what you're doing. Is that, you know, if you look at the majority of the better restaurants, it is still about simplicity. The whole, gastronomy was gastronomy. That was, it is what it is, But if you really go around the world, I was just in Spain, it's really about simplicity. It's about 2 or 3 things on the plate, and that's it.
I happen to agree with you, but I think there's this trend, or there's this tendency on the part of some chefs, or maybe in collusion with the customers, to be deeply creative and have 14 ingredients on the plate, and I think it muddies the flavors.
Well, I think you could be deeply creative, and you could still only have 3 or 4 ingredients on the plate. Now they're unloading a lot of Jonah crab boats, which is a local crab, very sweet meat. You go to Chinatown, they sell it as Dungeness crab, but it's a fairly inexpensive product, and I buy them whole and I cook them, and then my guys pick the meat out of the shell, and then we repack it. Like now I'm using lobster mushrooms from the Pacific Northwest and the crab, and then I put Ritz crackers on the top, and I bake it in the oven. And it has a certain level of creativity, but it's still really only 3 ingredients.
Right. No, I agree. I mean, like I said, I think it's harder to be creative with fewer things, because you can hide behind all those other ingredients. And you don't even know what you're tasting after.
You don't even know what you're tasting. Well, it was always my kind of gripe with that whole Pan-Asian food, it was just so many ingredients sometimes. You had no idea what you were eating.
Right. And do you ever think about how healthy fish is? I mean, it's like a bonus. You're cooking this beautiful product, it tastes good, and it's actually good for you. The fat in the fish is...
Oh yeah, well, the omegas, especially for women. I mean, there's been many studies, and they say that even eating lesser quality and farmed fish and stuff like that is very beneficial to you. It's very high in omega, especially for women who want to bear children, and it gives you good skin. I eat a lot of fish.
But I mean, it's marvelous, because the kind of food you have here is relatively guilt-free. I mean, you can come and eat your food and not say, oh, it's not good for me. So it's actually an added bonus. The thing about fish, though, is that it's I think it's a very funny thing, in the sense that a lot of people are scared of it. So I'll serve fish at my house, and people say, well, wow, fish, I don't know how to cook it, or I don't like fish. And I have friends who grew up in this country, they don't eat fish. I mean, I just don't get it at all.
Well, I mean, they ate fish out of a box as a kid. That was their only experience,
Frozen
They
fish
were
sticks.
from Ohio or whatever. They ate lake perch from Lake Erie. You've seen what Lake Erie looks like, right? And, they ate frozen fish.
So we were talking about people who are afraid of fish, and I'm wondering, what can you do to help them? I mean, I know that your cookbook is a reference point for me every week, but what are some basic things that people at home should think about when they're cooking fish, so they shouldn't be so nervous, let's say?
Well, I mean, I think like our parents cooked fish at home, right? They would go to the butcher, or they would go to the fishmonger, and they had a relationship. They knew them. Like my mother would bring, a bottle of wine, a couple cigars to the fishmonger, every year for his birthday. That's the first thing, some kind of relationship where you're going to go buy your product regularly, and you know them and they know you. Have the fishmonger do the work for you. I was talking to somebody the other day, they said, oh, I've been bringing my fish home trying to fillet it myself. It makes a mess in your house. Have him do it, have him cut it the way that you want them to cut it, right? Bring it home, right? And the basic rule of thumb is that what the mistake that people make is, okay, they take the fish, they put it in the oven, they cook it, and they go, is it done? Well, maybe not, and they put it back in the oven for another 5 minutes, and they kill it.
And dry it out.
So at that particular moment, when you say, is it done? It's done.
It's done.
And that's the biggest mistake people make.
Overcooking fish.
They overcook their fish.
Right.
They think that the house is going to smell, but
Right.
It's not the case.
Right. And I know recently you've been involved with Italy, which is it fair to say it's Vitali and Bastianich's venture?
Yes.
So what is your involvement? It's a mega Italian grocery store on 23rd and 5th, so what are you doing there?
Well, I help oversee the fish restaurant with some of the fish buying, and create the menus and help them with the fish market.
And you can get fresh fish there.
They have an awesome market.
Yeah.
There's a lot of markets around New York City that I would, there's a couple that I would recommend, and that's definitely in the top 2 or 3.
So when you finish this interview, you've been sort of saying off camera that you're going to go fishing, right?
Yeah.
And if you catch something decent, you can serve it here or no?
Sometimes.
Sometimes. But I mean, it's legal?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you're not killing rabbits or killing ducks. Fish you can serve.
Well, we like to do that too, but we're not allowed to do it
That's what I'm saying.
anymore.
You can't do that anymore,
No,
right?
we can't do it
but fish,
anymore.
like I say, fish is the
Fish
one
is-
wild thing you can.
Fish is still wildness.
So the last thing I wanted to ask is, I remember a few years ago you told me half jokingly that you were thinking of opening a beer garden in Brooklyn. So are you doing that anytime soon?
Nah.
I think it'd be great.
I was living hard and dreaming.
It was a great idea.
It was a good idea. It would be good.
Be a nice break from this.
Exactly. You know, herring on toast with Weiss beer.
Sounds good.
Sounds good, right?
Dave, thanks again for taking the time to meet with me today. I really appreciate it. I feel I've learned a lot, especially the simplicity of product, knowing when to stop and allowing the product to really express itself on the plate.
Yeah, I mean, people understand that simple is best, and you should keep it simple, and they understand that.
Perhaps the most striking thing about Dave is his ability to leave well enough alone. His stunning knack for finding the best product is evident on every plate. That's the most remarkable thing about the food that he's turning out at Esca, the simplicity of it. On the next Chef's Table, I'll sit down with Chef Alfred Portali at Gotham Bar and Grill. Portali is a true rarity in the world of chefs. Alfred is the kind of chef for whom the smallest detail is often the most important. And that's what we'll be hearing about on the next Chef's Table.